Okie dokie. Well, welcome everybody to the Public Practice Accountants Club on Clubhouse, where public practitioner thought leaders, industry specialists and accountants just like you discuss hot topics in public practice and how they go about navigating the public practice landscape all around the world. So fundamentally, public practice has the same principles, dynamics and challenges no matter where we are in the world. We might have some different tax seasons, busy periods in legislation, but at the core, we are very much the same. So our room this morning is why giving and receiving of effective feedback is so hard. So there's a few people that I don't know in the Clubhouse stratosphere this morning. So good morning, everybody. I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Linda Steffens. I'm an accountant, an author and an introvert, and I've been hanging around public practice now for just over 30 years. I've owned my own accounting businesses in that time, been a practice manager, and now I am an accountant's coach, particularly helping accountants who already do advisory to turn that into a consistent and ongoing income stream for their business. So that's where I hang out and what I do from day to day. And of course, my amazing co-host is with me again, Kylie Baxter. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kylie. I don't think I know everyone in the room either. I run a public practice accounting firm here on the Gold Coast, but today is my first day back from holidays. So I literally had a late night flight last night.
Wow.
And I'm here bright and sparkly. So you're either getting me at my very best because I'm well rested or my very worst because it's the first thing I've got to do when I get back.
Well, now that's commitment, Kylie Baxter. We love it. So that's great to hear. I hope you've had a lovely break.
I have. Thank you very much. I really have. Yeah,
excellent.
It's been great.
Excellent. All right. So for those of you that are in the Clubhouse stratosphere, or if you're listening to us on one of the live stream platforms, please say hello to us. Tell us where you're tuning in from. We love to know where you're tuning in from. You can do that using the chat box or the chat function in Clubhouse, and also comments or posts out in the Facebook world or on LinkedIn. We can see them too. So please let us know where you're coming from. And of course, if you've got any questions for us, any ideas for topics, anything that you'd like to talk to us about, even just to say hi, please let us know, because we love to talk to our listeners. And of course, we'll take your feedback and advice on how we can make this live stream better for you and more engaging for you. Okay, we are also a CPA discussion group, so you can get your CPE and CPD points for tuning in and listening. And of course, if you want to listen to any previous topics, they are available in replays or over on my YouTube channel. So plenty of stuff that we talk about all of the time, right, Carly? So
plenty of stuff.
This morning, why giving and receiving of effective feedback is so hard. So when I was working as a public practice as a practice manager for a large accounting firm, we did an exercise where we all had to provide each other feedback. Now, I thought at that time, it wasn't that long ago, but it's probably 10 years ago now, I suppose. I thought I was pretty good at accepting feedback. But when some of that feedback came my way, I found myself feeling a bit defensive, a little bit upset. Perhaps there's a little bit of anger floated in and out there as well. And later, I felt a bit dismissive of it. You know, it's like, no, that's not me. I don't do that. I don't have to worry about it. They've got it all wrong. But of course, I did take that on board, and it did allow, you know, after some time thinking about it, it did benefit me, because I knew that I had to take that on board and I had to listen. But it was a bit hard. And sometimes then when you're giving feedback, you don't want to get anyone in trouble. You don't want to be unkind. You don't want to make anyone feel bad. And even though sometimes the feedback is anonymous, you know, often easy enough to determine where it's come from. So it's all about feedback and benefiting people, really, truly listening to feedback, and how we go about navigating that. So that's what we want to talk about today, feedback. And I know feedback, Kylie, is something you find, or had mentioned you find, quite easy.
Yeah, I think I much prefer. I can hear a bit of feedback. Just give me 1 second.
Okay, might be a speaker turned on something.
I think for me, I'm a very upfront communicator. You know, I will, if there's a difference between under communicating or over communicating, I'll be the one that does over. So I really like giving people feedback so they know exactly where they stand. And I also like receiving feedback, but there's a few ways that I definitely filter it. That's one of the things that I say to people a lot. Make sure you filter the feedback. All feedback is good feedback, but filter the feedback, because I think, like you said, Linda, our natural reaction to feedback is, well, we don't know what someone's going to say. But you know what? At any time of the day or night, we don't know what someone's going to say. On this occasion, it just happens to be about us, you know. So I think we need to toughen up a little bit to feedback because of the benefits that can be gained from it.
Yes. So I like that. So it's sort of, you use the word filter, and I think it's reflecting on that and positioning and taking it in the right way, you know, probably thinking about our first natural instinct is to go, oh, you know, I'm wrong, it's bad, it's, you know, but it's not. It's just that ability to reposition that. But anyway, let's start down the track of why we should give feedback. So, you know, I think that's the important thing. We don't ever want to really do something or own something unless we know why we're doing it or what's in it for us. You know, that's the classic scenario, really. So feedback, most definitely, given the right way, is constructive and vital to both our own as perhaps a leader or a manager, but also to employees and our employees or our colleagues, ongoing development. So feedback clarifies, it helps us clarify expectations. It helps people learn from their mistakes, I think, and can also build confidence. So I think there's some good reasons in there why you should give feedback. Kylie, do you have any more?
Yeah, I think feedback for me comes in 3 different baskets. You know, it needs to be constructive because we're in a professional working environment. So when we talk about being constructive, we need that person or ourselves to be able to take something actionable away. So that's my sort of key indicator, is what I'm giving this person or is what I'm receiving actionable. And if I'm receiving feedback that I'm not quite sure what I need to do with it, I need to ask more questions about that. So my second and third bucket is either complaint or compliment. So, you know, feedback is either constructive, a complaint, or a compliment, in my opinion. And we need to really define clearly, particularly if we are giving the feedback, which bucket this belongs in. Because what actually happens with feedback is, like you said, Linda, people go, that's not me, they've got it all wrong.
Yes.
But if when we're giving feedback, we put it into one of these buckets, it really helps us vocalize clearly, because clear is kind, you know, why we're giving this feedback and what actionable steps we want people to take. And same for ourselves. If I ever receive feedback, is it a complaint? Is it a compliment? Is it constructive? What actionable step do I need to take?
Yeah, perfect. I love that. I love those buckets: constructive, complaint, or compliment. Is that right? Did I get that right? Yeah, great. I also think too, look, we're in professional services, and particularly tuning into a public practice room here this morning. So we deal with clients. That's a group we missed out when I was just talking about feedback. Clients, you know, sometimes we've got to give one of those buckets to clients as well, or we should. And I love that you mentioned clear is kind. So we should not balk from this, because I do think that we've all got a responsibility to be able to do this. How we navigate that and how we creep up on it, or what we do, well, we'll go through some of that this morning. But yeah, that was great. Thanks, Kylie. So I've looked at this as, when I've been thinking about this topic, as why. So we've covered off why we should give feedback. What is feedback? And I think, or what is in particular effective feedback? And at its core, effective feedback, which you mentioned again, Kylie, is about a person's goal or their ability to take action to achieve a goal. So it is goal related and action related. So there was, I think there was 9 things that I looked up that said what effective feedback was all about. So I thought we might have a quick chat about some of those. So the first one was goal referenced. What are we trying to achieve here? And that's something you just mentioned, Kylie.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's really important, particularly when we're dealing with staff, because that's most of the time where feedback comes into play. We need to be on the same page about what everyone wants. And I think feedback is also about setting expectations. Now, they need to be set from both the feedback giver and the feedback receivee.
Yes.
You know, it's what we want and it's what we need. And the part that I find that people forget to care about is the most important, which is what we need.
Yes.
Everyone focuses on what we want.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think goals are a really important part of feedback.
And I love that you said that those expectations need to be set by both parties in this relationship. And so what if, and I know what I would do in this situation, but what if you didn't set any of those expectations and you just, you know, somebody just came in and you just let them do whatever they thought, and they're going along merrily thinking they're doing the right thing, and you're sitting there going, that's not right, that's not how we do it here. What if that's the situation, and then you find yourself, you know, wanting or needing to give feedback? How can we do that in a goal referenced way when we haven't even set the expectation?
Yeah, so you know, it needs to be constructive.
Yeah.
And I think that situation that you just mentioned happens all the time.
Yes.
Not from lack of trying, but probably from busyness. You know, you get new people in, you give them a rough outline, you mean to go back to them, and they are good, so they sort of get carried away and go off on their own tangent. I would suggest that means that the missions, goals, and hasn't been particularly outlined to that person. But that aside, you need to have something to come back and anchor to, and that's what I would anchor to. So the feedback wouldn't be, hey, you're not doing it the way I want it to be done. My feedback would actually be, hey, I haven't spent enough time outlining to you exactly what I want this to look like.
So planning, communication, and time, again, 3 things that we talk about all of the time. We could almost stand on a soapbox and scream them from there, couldn't we?
And that's one of the things. Like, I have a general rule: no feedback on Fridays, particularly if it's in the complaint bucket. You might decide to give a compliment on Friday, but even compliments I save till Monday because it really starts the week on a good tone. Fridays are the worst days because inevitably you might do it after lunch. You get people who are just, you know, at the end, they're tired. It can demotivate people despite how you deliver that feedback. And then they go away and stew on it for the weekend. Or
that's not nice.
They flip it away and think, I'm not even thinking about that. No. None of those outcomes are what you want from feedback. So I have a rule: no feedback on Fridays.
Oh, you're just full of gems this morning. Clear is kind and no feedback Friday. Love it. Everybody, I hope you're writing these down. Fabulous. So that was goal referenced. Tangible and transparent was the next one in that list that I had Googled. So again, I think that's extremely important. It's nowhere in there does it say emotionally generated or personal or anything like that. You know, feedback is all about what is it, the actual thing, and is it completely transparent on both sides of the coin, right?
Yeah, look, in those situations, I would say definitely go to the person with 1 or 2 examples, particularly if it's in that complaint or constructive bucket. But also, I think be ready to have that other person, the receiver, if we're giving the feedback, say, I'm not ready for this feedback right now. You can't just approach someone and also be tough enough to say that. You know, if you approach someone on a Friday afternoon, they're in the middle of something, they're working to a deadline that potentially, you know, a client's breathing down their back, not the best time to give them constructive or complaint.
Particularly,
you know,
if you just go blah and here it is and spit it out, you know, that's probably not great. You're right.
And, you know, we talk a lot about feedback being non-emotional, super professional, constructive. Even if you hit all of those things, that might not be what that person needs right then. So they can't evade it. You can't say, no, I don't want this feedback. Thank you. Thank you for offering the feedback. No, thank you. I don't want to hear it. You might be able to say, I'm blah, 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 blah. Can we regroup on day?
Yes.
And that's so reasonable most of the time. Like, it's so rare that feedback needs to be that urgent, you know, unless there's an actual project. So I think clear, transparent, all of those things are really important, but it also means being transparent with where you're at that point in time. So that's for the receiver. For the giver, you need to think, am I non-emotional about this? Can I do this professionally? Can I
be? Yes, is the other point. Yeah.
Because if you've just been yelled at by a client for something that person did, that's not the best time to go and deal with that.
No, it's not. So I think we're starting to hear this framework of, first we probably have to process, think about it first ourselves, and then work out, you know, what's a really good plan of action here. Now let's balance that out against, because I'm going to skip down a couple in this list. Timely. So let's balance that out against timely. So we've just put on the fact that we've, you know, that, oh, the client's just yelled at me, something's gone wrong, I'm charged up about it, I'm going to march out of my office and give someone a what I think is constructive, but probably will come across as a complaint, feedback. That's probably not the best time, even though that's right then and there, that's timely, but timely is at discretion, right?
Yeah, I don't think right then and there is always timely.
No.
I think timely needs to be considered. When you give feedback, you always want to give 1 or 2 examples, no matter what bucket it fits in. What you don't want to be doing is referencing examples from months ago, or even a month ago. You want to reference an example from the last. You want to reference an example from the last couple of weeks at maximum. And often I'll go, I think there's a problem there. I'm just going to keep an eye on that, not run to the person and tell them how I think they're doing it wrong. I'll just wait, and then I'll collect a couple of current examples and then be able to use it. Because when you tell someone as nicely and professionally as you do, you're doing it wrong, their brains switch off. And they start filtering it in their own narrative. So you need to be able to pull them back and go, this is the example I'm talking about, and this is the example, and they need to be recent. One of staff members' biggest complaints, and I really wish that I had the reference for this, but I've read it several times, is that they only get feedback during their annual reviews, and that feedback can be old, and they're like, I didn't even know this was a problem. I've been doing this for 9 months. No one's ever told me, and now it's affected. So timely doesn't always mean immediate, but it does mean soon.
Yes. And I think if that's one area, given what I have seen and know about most people who are attracted to the accounting industry and our profile and our communication style, that's the one thing we struggle with. It's a balance of, I'm busy, I've got to get my work done, I saw that, it annoyed me, but I just put it into the memory bank and I don't necessarily say anything about it. So our very supportive communication makes it a little bit difficult for us to deal with anything that feels like a bit of conflict, and feedback can feel like that to us, even though it's not. So it's all about, I think, giving ourselves time to plan and process and think about how you would perhaps like that delivered to you, or drawing off some experience that you've had in the past where it hasn't been timely and, you know, it's perhaps not worked out so well. So timely, I think, is a big one for the accounting industry, Kylie. I think that's the place we've got to. And that annual feedback, I've just had that across a number of firms. team members come to me as an outsourced third party that's helping out with the firm and have said, well, we thought we were doing great, and all of a sudden we come into this annual review and we're just barraged with this whole list of things that we're apparently doing wrong. And so not great.
Not great. And I think if you are going to give feedback at an annual review, you need to make sure you give at least one per bucket.
Yeah,
because
okay.
You can't just go constructive and complaint. You've also got to give a compliment, no matter how hard you might struggle to find one. And if you are struggling to find one, then it probably means that person's got to be on more regular feedback than you're giving them. So I totally empathize with staff members in that case. You know, I'm the opposite. Like, from a personal point of view, the way I run my team is I give feedback all the time, and it's actually something that I warn people about when they come to work from me. You know, it can, because some people can find it confrontational. If they have never received feedback before, they can find it a bit like, oh, you're telling me lots of stuff all of the time, and I'm not used to talking to people like that. So I find it a bit sad. Not everyone is me, you know. I'm pretty confident to give people feedback because it's not always bad. People associate feedback with negativity, and it's not.
No.
Because really it's about getting everyone on the same page and working towards the desired outcome.
Absolutely. That's something that, you know, we should absolutely touch on, and we might do that a little bit later, but that's the culture of feedback, right? So being able to lead that, whether you're an employee, a manager, or a leader, owner, whatever that looks like, we can all lead that culture of feedback in a very positive way of looking at it. And that's certainly something that I've had to learn through the later years of my career, because I have to say that I didn't have particularly good role models in that area to show me how to do that, or for me to learn from. So it's something I learned a little bit myself, and some techniques that I now use when I'm in the coaching environment. So, you know, but yeah, okay. So some other things that this list had on it was actionable. So you mentioned that. So, you know, again, feedback is something that, we need to give it, but what's the outcome then? It needs to be outcome oriented, right? So what could they do then to not necessarily fix things, but learn from this?
Yeah. It depends on what the example is, right? But if you've got someone that just is genuinely, as an example, not speaking to clients in the manner that you'd expect, perhaps you can offer them some training. So one of my questions, if I'm doing constructive or complaint, is, how can I support you in making sure this doesn't happen again?
Yeah.
And often people say, oh no, there's nothing. I just need to remember that, or I just need to be focused on that, or whatever the story is. And then you have to ask them those leading questions. Well, how can you focus on that? You know, we're paperless, so I don't like the sticky note on the computer.
No.
But that is actually a lot of people's default because it's visual.
It's a visual
So, you know,
thing.
if you've got someone in client services being a bit clipped or short with people on the phone, that's something visual that helps them to, you know, remind them they're the face of the business. They're the first person that people speak to when they pick up the phone. So, yeah, I think it's about making sure you're offering support as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that rolls right into user-friendly, you know. So how do we make it easy for somebody to learn from it and take it on? So just what you've said there, all about actionable. The last two they had on this list were ongoing and consistent. So I think we've covered all of that and talked about all of that as well, that don't wait for 12 months. You know, it needs to be, again, feeding that culture of feedback. And what does that look like? And consistent. One day it's this, the other day it's that, and the next day it's something else. That's not going to work either. That's simply not constructive at all. That's just confusing.
I think that's the takeaway a lot of staff do as well. Like, I'm so confused because last week you said this and this week you said this and blah, blah, blah. So that's why it's really important to have something to anchor to, you know, a common goal, an outcome, that sort of thing, because otherwise it can seem, particularly to a more junior staff member or somebody that's new to your firm, really haphazard.
Yes. So I like that. Some structure around it. We generally work very well within structure. We are structured beings. And so having that anchor, like you said, whether it's a common goal, a project with outcomes, perhaps a professional or personal development plan that you've talked about with the employee, or also too, I know you mentioned at the start, the strategic foundation. So the vision, the mission, the values, something to be able to structure and anchor your conversations and your feedback around. Very important, will help you stay consistent. But I think it's just exercising the feedback muscle, to allow yourself to really see consistent ongoing feedback and the benefits that can actually have. Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about how we actually do this then. So we know all what we've got to do. How do we actually go about doing this? How do we go around this acting immediately or timely, or what does that look like? How do we fit that into our day?
As you know, I'm a big fan of time blocking. So actually I have set times per week to really consider what feedback needs to be given. But I don't have time set to give that feedback because it needs to in somewhat be organic and on an ad hoc nature as the incidents arise. However, I think it's super, super important to make sure that the way you're approaching feedback is considered. Really well considered.
That's a great word, considered.
You don't, some feedback ad hoc, like, oh, hey, can you make sure you fill the coffee machine up? Like that's part of your role, whatever. That's going to be immediate while you're standing at the coffee machine for the fourth day in a row going, there's no beans. And people are like, oh yeah, no worries, that's fine, didn't realize, whatever. But some feedback, particularly if it's going to be more formal or something that's putting people off, you really need to think about how you're going to approach it with them. And this is a personal preference. I don't love sending a meeting invite to someone saying, hey, we need to talk about this. Unless they already know it's an issue.
Yes.
So if there's been a staff blow up, client blow up, something's gone wrong and they already think, oh, they're going to come to me at any stage, I think that's the time when scheduling a meeting is good because it allows both parties to really go, this is the time we're going to meet and talk about it. But it doesn't mean that you can be weird until then. Everyone needs to be professional, normal, and take that time to deal with the matter. So that's when I think that that's reasonable. I don't think it's reasonable to email a staff member ad hoc, and remembering that as particularly business owners or managers, we're probably sending those emails after hours.
Yes.
So they're either getting it after hours or first thing when they get in the morning and they think, what's that about? What's that about? That doesn't make them the most productive people until that meeting happens.
No, that's exactly right. And you've just been talking about picking the right time and place. That's another place. That's another important thing. And I know it's a little bit difficult around the place because I know as a practice manager, if people I asked them to come in my office, it was very much, oh God, what have I done wrong? And so it's very much about this, again, this culture that you've got there and the whole, what you were talking about there, not to be weird with each other until you actually have that conversation, or never really, you don't want to be weird. But the whole, you can get some people that you feel like you got to walk on eggshells around. That's not great for your culture either. That's toxic. And so, really important again, that it's going to come back to this reinforcement of feedback and culture and expectation around what this is and your leadership in that, where it's really going to come from.
Your leadership is really important for feedback because it means that you really need to know the staff member that you're dealing with. Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes they're new, you're still getting to know them, they're still fitting into your team. But on the whole, I know that I've got staff that I need to say, it's nothing bad, or don't stress about it, we'll talk about it then. Like you really need to make sure you know that staff member, because at the end of the day, we all want the same outcome, which is get the client work done effectively, accurately, let's bill them, let's move on. Like it's a cycle. So you can't disrupt it's one of those don't cut your nose off to spite your face. Do you know what I mean? Like don't go and have a go at someone and then think, why aren't they finishing that work that I asked them to finish?
Yes, yes. And you know, this concept of everyone's going to think differently, you know. I think sometimes, because we can always think, I don't understand why that's not common sense. I think we use common sense in the wrong way, you know. It's a bit general. Common sense to us is not necessarily common sense to somebody else. So as a leader, you need to be very clear and concise about expectations. And when you are, I'm just going to step back a bit, Kylie, you were talking about, you know, the timing and when you would give feedback. So as if you're in a position where you do have people that you're leading or managing, there has to be a little wiggle room in your day for these types of things, doesn't there?
100%. And priority wise,
Yeah.
a complaint to me is just as important as a compliment, and vice versa. You know, if you get that compliment, you want to pass that on. So we need to think about priorities. We need to think about what I've got on in the day, but we also need to think about our staff member, how they're going to react to this, you know, their mental health around it as well.
Yes.
What else everyone has got on, if it's going to disrupt or affect any of the other members of the team. There's all these things that need to be thought about. And that's why I think people don't give feedback. They're just like, oh, too hard basket. It's not that big of a deal. I'll do it myself.
Yes.
You can't just do everything yourself.
No.
You know, and it's fair. Feedback is fair and should be expected. We need to change the culture around feedback, that it's not this scary thing, that it's actually so important and even integral to the professional office environment.
Clear is kind, right?
Clear is kind.
Clear is kind. So just thinking about, to, you know, instinctually as humans, we want to do well. You know, we don't come to a job or work trying to muck things up. That's not what we're trying to do. So feedback, even at that basic level, regardless of what we're doing, is very important. And direction and constructive feedback, so that we know if we're starting, you know, if we're doing a good job, or we've got to learn, or we've got to pick up our game in other areas. Because at that very basic human level, that's what we're all seeking. So some sort of leadership or direction, to my mind, anyway.
I think, and probably one of my tips is, at the moment we've got staff, you know, we've got a recruitment issue. People are scared to give staff feedback because they think, oh, they'll just run away, or they'll leave me, or whatever the story is.
It's completely the opposite, right?
Pretty much, Like we want to make sure that we're setting people up for success. And by people, we mean our staff members, ourselves, the business, and our clients. So as long as the feedback fits into one of these three buckets, and we're giving someone an actionable takeaway, that's setting them up for success. Sometimes you have to really plan, particularly if you're uncomfortable with giving feedback, and even rehearse what you're going to say, because you might think, oh, I'm giving this person this great information that will help them. They really want a pay rise. That will help them be more productive, which will mean they bill more, which means I can give them a pay rise sooner. If you don't say all of that bit and just say, stop, blah, 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 blah. It loses. It loses how you're setting everyone up for success and aligning everyone's interests as well. So I think if feedback doesn't come naturally to you, and I would say it doesn't come naturally to 90% of people, you need to really make sure that you are practicing and even rehearsing, which sounds so corny, but this isn't a skill that we come equipped with, right?
No.
It's something that most people have to learn.
Yes.
And the other thing I would say is, when you are in that conversation, make sure you set the tone of the conversation early on. Even in the most difficult discussions, I will say to staff, and I'm very casual with my staff members, so this is not everyone's way, but I will say to them, this isn't going to be the best conversation of your life, but let's get into it. And they go, okay, you know, or
ready to go.
Or, hey, I just wanted to actually talk to you about this situation that happened. It's nothing bad. We just need to have a chat about it. So I make sure I set the tone early on, so that they're actually listening to the words that I'm saying, and they're not thinking, get to the point, because all of that before bit is so important in actually getting to the point.
Yeah. So I believe every conversation or everything that you have to do or experience in life can be done in a positive way, or something positive can come from it if you just frame it that way. So it's all about how you're thinking about it and how you put it together. I love that you talked about giving feedback as a skill. So skills can be mastered or can be learned, but you've got to take the time to do that. So just thinking all of a sudden I'm now a manager and I've got to give feedback. Right. I just start blah, blah, blahing around the office about what I want done. That's not going to be a great way to approach it. Have a look at it and plan it and think about what you might want to say. And that skill is great. I think just writing down a few dot points is great to make sure that you get all the right things out, rather than just, that example you gave before, missing all the framework didn't set up the actual feedback to be as positive as it could be. So I think those were two very important things. And, around, even though conversations are about a negative issue or something that, like you said, Kylie, it's not going to be the best conversation of your life, but here we go. It does set the expectation for the fact that you're trying to help. And ultimately, that's what you're trying to do, is to create a win-win situation or a good outcome for everybody, even though some of these things might be a little bit awkward to speak about. But again, you can't sit on this for as long as it takes for us to feel comfortable. That can't be a month. That's way too long. So I suppose thinking about timeliness, what do you think it is, Kylie? Is it within a week? Is it a few days? What do you think it is? Well, I suppose it can be in a few hours, just depending on what everyone's day looks like, can't it?
And it depends on the severity of the matter, it really does, and the impact that it has on those common goals. I think where a lot of business owners may not go wrong, but just not be aware, is when they delegate giving feedback to someone else. So, a lot of us have managers in those roles, and it might be, hey, you need to go to that person and do that because it's a bit scary coming from me. But and then that manager might not have that skill yet, or they might go, I rate that a priority Z.
Yep. And it doesn't get done.
It doesn't get done, or B, it doesn't get done in a timely manner, or C, it doesn't get done in the manner in which it needs to be. So if you do have managers that you are worried, hang on, I don't think they're giving that feedback, then what you need to do is really sit in on those feedback sessions as an observer, because then you need to give the manager feedback as well. You can't, I think too often we promote people into these roles, whether we give them a title or not, and we just think, oh, let them loose, they're ready, they're fine. But it's a skill they need to learn. And the problem that happens is the pressure comes from the top, right? So the pressure is tell the manager to tell the person. The manager might not tell the person, or they might tell them in a less severe way. And then it might come to big blow up time because there's frustration or whatever the story is. And this genuinely happens in professional office environments. We've all seen it 1 million times before.
Yes.
And the person receiving the feedback goes, didn't even know it was that big a deal. Or, why are they losing it? And I didn't even get that it was a problem, even though they might have had a chat about it a couple of times before. So you really need to make sure that there's a key takeaway message.
Yes.
Actionable steps, key takeaway message. Are we on the same page? Do you understand?
And I think if you're right, if you're instructing a manager or somebody else to give this feedback, very important that you're clear and concise and what you want the actions and the outcomes to have happen, right? So, that you don't lose, the meaning of this and what outcome you want in Chinese whispers. That's not a great way to go about it. And I think the other thing I want to talk about there, if we've got somebody, if the structure of our organization is that perhaps we've got somebody else that can give feedback, I'm going to switch that around a bit, and this concept of abdicating leadership or abdicating giving feedback yourself. Now, I think we can be very much, that seems very attractive to us. It's like, I don't have to give the feedback. I'll make the manager do it, So where do you stand on that, Kylie?
I actually think that the manager giving feedback or the direct report giving feedback is super important.
Yes.
Because it's a skill they need to learn and a skill that you want them to have.
Yep.
I also think that you need to use it effectively. Don't play good cop, bad cop,
No.
because that just annoys everybody, particularly in those higher levels. You need to support each other. You need to back each other. You need to be on the same page. But I don't think everything needs to come from the business owner. Like if it's put beans in the coffee machine, that doesn't need to come from the person that runs the show. It can come from other people. As well, if there are some problems with a staff member, they can feel a little bit hammered by one particular person. And that is when it's best to make sure that this feedback is split. We don't all learn audibly.
No.
So sometimes, but feedback is generally given audibly, right?
Yes.
So sometimes I'll say something and someone else will say something and they'll hear two different things, even if it's a more scripted situation, you know, simply because of the other ways that you're expressing yourself. So if you say a quite serious thing, but in a casual, relaxed nature, that's sends a different message than saying something that's exactly the same in you've sent an email meeting request for that Thursday lunchtime. They come in, it's very formal, and you know, you deliver it in sort of a very serious gruff tone, no smiles, no expression.
Exactly.
Very different situation, but yet you've done all the key things that we've talked about. You've given them key actionable takeaways and made sure that they understand what's being said. But the experience is different. So I do think it is important for staff particularly, and this happens, I do it with clients as well. Told that person that thing 3 times, they're still not listening to me, you need to ring and tell them. You know?
Well, look, and I think sometimes, you know, to get the feedback across, and this is something that I am often finding myself saying, is that saying something once is not necessarily going to sink in. You need to repeat, say it again, perhaps say it in a different way, you know, and actually almost coach somebody through some of these feedback type items. You know, put coffee beans in the coffee machine. That's a fairly easy one, you know, but where it's perhaps a behavioral or a performance or a learning thing, then that might take a little bit longer. So feedback is different at different levels, right?
It is. I'd like to use the coffee machine one as an example, because I think often little tiny things happen, escalate. You know, I heard a story once, it didn't happen in our office, but it was about teaspoons on the side of the sink, and someone just lost it one day, and the staff were like, oh, that's weird.
I've had no milk in the fridge.
Like it is those small things. So what I really like to do, particularly when giving feedback, is ask questions. Is there a reason why blah, blah, blah? Do you know what I mean? Is there a reason why you don't fill up coffee beans in the morning? Oh, yeah, I prefer to do it in the afternoon before I leave. Awesome. But you leave at 3:00 and people drink coffee after that. So then there's none the next morning. Oh, I didn't realize. Okay, cool. Can you start doing it in the morning? You know, it's really about what outcome do we want in that situation. The outcome's easy. We want coffee beans in the coffee machine. I've been doing it. And from the staff member's point of view, they're like, I do it every day. See that disconnect? So it's about breaking down those barriers. And that is like a super simple example, right? But what actually happens is if everyone else in the office gets cranky and annoyed and start like doing sideways jabs or passive aggressive emails or messages, that staff member goes, fine then, I just put your own coffee beans in.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happens. And we can see that argy-bargy go on in an organisation all of the time. So yes, classic example, those little small things, they can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And, you know, as a manager, do I have to deal with putting coffee beans in the coffee machine? Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do. So, you know, but we're talking a little bit flippantly about that there, but that extends to all types of feedback. Exactly that.
100%, you know, it could be, small things have a big impact. Like if somebody is leaving last and not putting the security system on, that's quite serious in nature, but it's one tiny actionable thing, like the coffee bean situation. So that's how things that seem small, so a staff member might go, oh, I just forgot once, or no one's shown me how, but has a big impact and a big, you know, so you really do need to take quite an immediate approach to feedback. It doesn't need to be that it is given immediately, but you need to immediately go, do I let this slide? Or we constantly need to be filtering how we're going to give that feedback, as well as filtering when we're receiving it.
And something that you mentioned before, which is a technique that I absolutely love, and I teach a lot in the advisory space, is asking questions. So something that we're sort of conditioned to, brought up with in professional services, and particularly in public practice, and particularly around compliance, is that we're supposed to have the answers. We're the professional, we're supposed to have the answers. That's not the case, okay? That's not the case generally in a whole lot of circumstances. But feedback's another one. Don't feel like you've got to just tell somebody what to do and they'll do it, because I guarantee they won't. No one actually likes to be told what to do. But if you can broach a subject by asking questions and getting that person to understand in their own time and in their own mind what's going on, leading questions, of course, and you know, you've given some thought about this, then that person, when they actually say it, here's what I'm going to do, and they say it out loud, that's when it becomes real. That's when they then start to hold themselves accountable, and you can also hold them accountable. Well, you said you were going to do this. You know, I didn't tell you to do this, and they just nodded their head. That's not going to work. So the asking of questions and the drawing out of the action is a really good technique. And I suspect you use that all the time, Kylie.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more you give feedback, the easier it is. You know, It does become a really refined skill as part of your repertoire. But the way I generally do it is I've got a formula. I set the tone. I give an explanation of, hey, here in this office, or here in this business, or here at IQ, this is how we generally do things. And most of the time people are nodding like, yep, I'm aware. Yeah, of course. Like, of course, that makes sense. And then it's all right, well, there's this situation, and explain the situation with one or two relevant, timely examples. Most of the time, I don't even really need to give the feedback, because the person sitting across the, you know, coffee shop table or next to me on the lounge has already gone, oh, connect the dots. Yep, got it.
Correct. Exactly right. And all of a sudden they'll blurt out to you, oh, wow, I should be doing this then. And you go, yep, that's it. So, you know, next thing you've got this solution focused, engaged employee who's going to go away and just take some action because they thought they were doing the right thing and didn't even know.
And it changes it from this negative connotation conversation into that staff member is a little bit chuffed and proud of themselves, that they were like, oh, before you say it, da-da-da-da-da.
Yes.
Cool.
I beat
and
you
then
to
everyone's
the
a bit
answer.
like, yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Winner. So I think then too, just touching on briefly, because gosh, time's gotten away from us already this morning. The who in this. So I think, look, naturally we look at feedback as leaders, owners, managers giving this type of feedback. Can it be, you know, lateral? Like, can it be across the board? Can anyone give feedback?
Everyone does give feedback, whether you're aware of it or not, actually. Yes, I think anyone can give feedback. The problem is that people might do it not in the most desirable way. Not everyone has this feedback skill, as we know. But feedback is small. Hey, we use a black pen here, not a blue pen. Or, hey, when clients come in, blah, 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 every time. There's a difference between feedback and training. And I think some people think it's all negative. I'm doing it wrong. But there's a difference, you know. So I think for me, feedback is when it's the specific time you've thought about exactly what needs to happen. There's been a situation, good, bad, ugly, and different. Whereas just sort of some training or general office conversation is that ad hoc nature that happens, you would hope, between all staff members all the time.
Yes. And I think if you are an employee in a firm or in an organisation, that just because perhaps there may not be a positive culture around feedback doesn't mean that you can't start that yourself, or you can't uphold that as a personal thing that you do. So please, the giving and receiving of feedback is so very important to everybody. And the skill of giving feedback is something, if you've got professional aspirations and you want to go further, then something that will be very important for you to learn, and a key skill in being able to prove that you can step up to perhaps higher echelons in your organization. So highly recommend taking some time to think about it and think about feedback in a positive light, even if we have to talk about some awkward or perhaps more negative issues. So a few fabulous things that came out of this morning. Kylie's 3 buckets of feedback: constructive, complaint, or compliment. They are fabulous, and even that is giving you some framework and structure around things, right, Kylie? So
Yeah.
if you're thinking about starting out with feedback, think about which bucket it falls into, and that will give you some tips on how to deal with it. Being able to put a framework or something to anchor your feedback to. Is it outcome? Is it a project goal? Is it something that aligns with strategic foundation, vision, mission, values, those sorts of things? Feedback is a skill, and a skill that we can all learn and master if we simply take the time to do that. So it doesn't need to be hard, but let's look at, thinking about how we can be a bit better at it if it's something that we don't particularly feel comfortable with. Clear is kind. That's another great one. The setting of expectations and the giving of feedback. Highly, highly important. And of course, I think I'm going to close out with asking questions. You don't have to have all the answers. Asking the questions is going to set a really nice tone for these conversations. And I think this consistent, regular touch base with team members, there should never really be anything popping up at a month or 2 months or 12 months that somebody doesn't know about. And I think that's the key. Any takeaways for you, Kylie?
Yeah, I think this has been a really good conversation,
Hasn't it?
one I'll
Yeah.
probably go back and listen to again in the future. But I think for me, we just need to remember that we're trying to set people up for success. And we have broad categories of people: our staff, business owners, our clients, and the business in itself. So we need to remember that. Why do you give feedback? It's to set people up for success. And hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that this morning or this evening or wherever you're tuning in from, whatever time zone that is. So we'll be back next week, Wednesday, the 5th of October, 7 a.m. And we're going to be talking about, this is something that came up in a previous discussion: should you niche down or be a generalist? So that's what we're going to talk about and see what pops out of that conversation. Who knows where our conversations end up or go, right, Kylie?
Oh, well, it's always fun.
It is always fun. And if you've got any questions for us, please pop them in the chat now, make a comment, reach out to Kylie and I on LinkedIn. Look, you can find our various organisational websites too quite easily if you just Google us. So, we're very contactable and we'd love to hear from you. But I hope everyone has a great day and a great week, and I look forward to you all tuning in next week. Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you, Linda, as always. See you next week.
Bye. See you then. Bye.